Of the hundreds of stories that survivors have entrusted to me as a therapist and sexual violence researcher, there's one that I would like to share with you all tonight. Gloria Stevens shared with me early in treatment that she hadn't been able to bring herself to put on a pair of shorts in over 20 years. Why? Because that's what she was wearing when she was 19 and a coworker knocked on her door, asked if she wanted to hang out, and then raped her. Like so many women that I have known, Gloria believed that it was her fault that she was raped because of what she wore. How is it possible that someone can come to believe that being raped is their fault? Rape isn't just an event. It's a culture. It's a culture so ingrained in our society that many people never realize that the movies, media, conversations, and even the toys our children play with create a culture where sexual violence is marginalized, trivialized, and excused. And this culture, it is everywhere. It's there when our children fall in love with stories like Sleeping Beauty and Snow White, where the path to redemption occurs through a handsome stranger kissing an unconscious woman. And how many times have you seen sexual violence used as a plot device in your favorite movie or TV show? Not to consider the complexities of the impact and consequences of these experiences, but instead to instill shock or make a character seem more relatable. It can be incredibly difficult for survivors to see the ways in which sexual violence is thrown around like it's no big deal, when for many of them it has been a singular defining moment of their lives. A review of more than 40 research studies found that as adolescents consume more sexually violent and sexually explicit content and media, their attitudes towards sexual violence become more accepting. And what about the words that we use to talk about sex? Have you ever noticed that so much of the language we use in casual and lighthearted conversation around sex actually involves violence? Hit that. Smash, rail, wreck, tear it up. Why? Why is that? And the next time that you see a news story, notice, does the language focus on the behavior of the perpetrator? Or does it shift the responsibility and the blame onto a survivor? One study found that as many as 88% of popular pornographic scenes include depictions of physical aggression or violence. Now, why does that matter? Because nearly 3/4 of teens in the United States report that they have consumed online pornography. And the first age at which they viewed it, on average, is 12 years old. Youth tell us that a primary reason for engaging with pornography is to better understand their own sexual preferences. Yet we know that pornography use can lead to distorted views regarding what sex should be and is like. Parents and schools have a more important role than ever to equip our youth with the skills and accurate information that they need to make informed and safe choices around sex and to navigate complex conversations around consent, learning to declare not only what they don't want, but what they do. Yet, review of textbooks commonly recommended by state and local governments in the US find that abstinence-focused programming tends to adopt a fear-driven narrative wherein abstinence or refraining from sex is portrayed as the only safe and acceptable manner of behavior for youth. This is framed as abstinence being a moral choice, suggesting that anything other than abstinence is a moral failing. This approach also tends to suggest there's a binary, wherein boys are portrayed as having uncontrollable sexual appetites, and girls are to serve as abstinence gatekeepers, responsible for not getting raped. And how are they to accomplish that? Set firm boundaries. Avoid sending mixed signals. Avoid situations or contexts that might involve drinking, or being alone, or dressing provocatively, or flirting. And above all, make a plan for how to remain safe and abstinent. And we wonder how it is that survivors like Gloria come to believe it was their fault because they chose to put on a pair of shorts. What message does this also send to youth who have already experienced sexual abuse as children? And boys, where are the messages for boys helping them to learn how to navigate these conversations around consent? And how about LGBTQ+ youth, whose experiences around sex and sexuality don't fit the binary scripts that are prescribed to us by society? We must call out rape culture for what it is. And I'd like us to start tonight by dismantling 5 rape myths or common false beliefs that rape culture teaches us are true about sexual violence. And to take a look at the first of these, I'll ask you all to close your eyes for just a moment, if you feel safe to do so. And I'd like you to think and imagine the first scene that comes to mind when you think of the word rape. For many of you, that might be a scene that looks something like this. Myth number 1. Rape can be avoided if women avoid dark alleys and dangerous places where strangers might be lurking. Now, while these types of assaults do happen, 80% of all rapes and sexual assaults are perpetrated by someone known to and often trusted by a survivor. That means friends, acquaintances, trusted adults, and intimate partners. It is easy for us to label a perpetrator as a predator and distance ourselves from that risk. It's much harder for us to confront the realities of everyday relationship dynamics, power imbalances, difficulties navigating conversations around consent, and abuse in homes, workplaces, and social groups. Myth number 2. She must have asked for it because she was fill in the blank. This myth gets right to the heart of victim blaming. It is so easy when we learn that someone has experienced sexual violence to ask the question, what was she wearing? Was she drinking? Were they high? Was she walking home alone late at night? Had she been flirting with him before this? The truth is, it does not matter if someone is drunkenly walking down the street in the middle of the night naked. There is no situation, behavior, or context that ever makes experiencing sexual violence a victim's fault. In every single context, a perpetrator chooses to engage in sexual behavior with someone without their affirmative consent, or in a situation where consent cannot be freely given. Rape culture teaches us to scrutinize the actions of survivors rather than ask the question of why did a perpetrator choose to engage in this behavior. Myth number 3, men can't be raped or assaulted. Now, much of the conversation around sexual violence, including in this talk, is focused on women. And that's because in the US, 1 in 5 women will experience attempted or completed rape in their lives. However, approximately 1 in 38 men will also experience rape or attempted rape. And that translates to nearly 3 million men in the United States alone. People of all genders perpetrate sexual violence against men. And men often experience unique and overlooked challenges to seeking support and recovery. And we know even less about the experiences of transgender and gender diverse survivors. However, the research that does exist suggests that experiences of sexual violence in these communities may actually be more prevalent than among cisgender women. Myth number 4. Many women lie about being raped to get attention or to seek revenge. Astonishingly, only 25% of all rapes and sexual assaults are ever reported to law enforcement. And one of the primary reasons that people choose not to report is fear of not being believed. Of the small number of cases that do get reported to police, research estimates that an extremely small number are false reports, and that the rate of false reporting is no different than for other felonies like physical assault or burglary. Yet these cases are highly publicized, which may make them seem to occur more often than they actually do. Myth number 5. If it's not violent, then it's not rape. I can't tell you the number of survivors that I have worked with over the years who have told me that they don't deserve to be struggling because what happened to them wasn't that bad. It didn't fit the stereotype of a violent rape. It turns out that sexual violence as a term can be very misleading because it encompasses a wide range of behaviors, and not all of them are violent in the ways we usually think about and use this word. Sexual violence can and does often involve coercion, threat, guilt, and manipulation. It can involve unwanted touching, kissing, oral sex, and actually doesn't always involve physical contact in the case of types of sexual harassment or things like non-consensual sexting. All of these experiences can lead to long-lasting harms, and upholding the myth that all assaults are violent invalidates the experiences of many, many survivors. So now we're at the point in the conversation where you might be asking yourself, what could I possibly do to address something as entrenched as rape culture? When I teach about this topic to college students, one of the things that they commonly tell me is that once you see rape culture, you can never unsee it. And I would argue that that is your first step to changing it. But it does require you to take a stand. The biggest thing that you can do is believe and support survivors. When your friend, roommate, sister, or child tells you that they have experienced sexual violence, I hope the very first thing that you will say is, I believe you, and it is not your fault. Tell them that you are there to support them in the ways that they need without pressuring for details they may not be ready to share. Take sexual violence seriously. When someone makes a rape joke, say something. Many people never realize the harm their words can cause. When you see someone at the bar who's had too much to drink, offer to buy them a safe ride home. And when someone asks a question of what was she wearing, remind them that it doesn't matter, and that questions like this keep survivors from coming forward. The important piece here is that we must hold people accountable for their actions and their words. Dismissing disrespect and aggression as boys will be boys does a disservice to people of all genders and upholds gender stereotypes that perpetuate rape culture. Consider volunteering for your local rape crisis center. Attend survivor support events and listen to the voices of survivors. And finally, support and encourage the curiosity of young people. Talk openly and honestly with them about sex and break down the traditional ideas around masculinity and femininity. When I think about the many awkward conversations I have and will continue to have with my own son, I cringe a bit. But I will continue to have them anyway, because I believe that he deserves to grow into a young man who understands his body and feels confident in his ability to express his wants, needs, and desires, and to ask about those of his sexual partners. Free from secrecy, shame, and guilt. Upholding a culture of secrecy and shame around sex and sexual violence doesn't just hurt survivors. It hurts every single one of us. But it doesn't have to be that way. The biggest thing that I have to work through when I'm working with survivors in therapy is helping them to break down the lifelong messages that bombard them with all the reasons why it was their fault. But you can make a difference every step you take to dismantle rape culture. And how do I know that it can make a difference? Because my patient, who I told you about, Gloria Stevens, one day she came to session wearing shorts. And that, my friends, that is hope. Thank you.